94% of religious debates end with both sides more convinced they're right than when they started. Today we're diving into the psychological traps that make religious discussions predictably explosive, the hidden biases that turn conversation into combat, and the one simple question that completely changes how these debates unfold. Here's a challenge before we begin. Think of your strongest religious or philosophical belief right now. Got it? Now try to argue the opposite side for 30 seconds. Seriously, pause the video and try it. Most people can't do this without feeling physically uncomfortable. That discomfort, it's the first clue to why these debates go nowhere. Why do we instantly remember every piece of evidence that supports our beliefs, but forget contradictory information within hours? Confirmation bias turns our minds into selective filters, only letting through information that confirms what we already think is true. When someone presents a compelling argument against our religious views, our brain literally works overtime to find flaws and dismiss the evidence. The result is intellectual blindness. Next time you're in a debate, ask yourself, am I looking for truth or just looking to win? Presenting strong evidence against someone's religious beliefs doesn't weaken their faith. It often makes them believe more strongly than before. Scientists call this the backfire effect, and it's why fact-checking websites sometimes increase belief in false information rather than correcting it. Your brain treats challenges to core beliefs as literal threats to survival, triggering fight-or-flight responses that shut down rational thinking. The stronger the evidence, the more creative your defenses become. This is why missionaries often become more devout after encountering other religions, not less. Picture this. Someone attacks your favorite sports team and you feel genuinely angry. Now imagine someone questioning your deepest religious beliefs. That anger multiplies by 10 because religious beliefs aren't just ideas we hold, they become part of who we are. When psychologist Leon Festinger studied religious groups whose prophecies failed, he discovered something shocking. Instead of abandoning their beliefs, members became more evangelistic. They recruited harder, preached louder, and doubled down on their faith. Your identity fights back fiercely. Separate your beliefs from your sense of self, and suddenly criticism becomes curiosity instead of attack. I once watched a debate where a Christian argued against evolution by claiming scientists believe humans came directly from monkeys. The evolutionists spent 20 minutes explaining common ancestry instead of discussing actual evidence. This is the strawman fallacy in action, attacking a weak or distorted version of your opponent's argument instead of their actual position. Religious debaters love creating strawmen because they're easier to knock down than real arguments. Muslims don't worship Mohammed, atheists aren't necessarily immoral, and Christians don't all interpret the Bible literally. Attack the real argument, not the caricature. Your credibility depends on it. How often do we mistake strong feelings for valid arguments? Emotional reasoning convinces us that because we feel something deeply, it must be true. A parent's grief over losing a child feels like proof of an afterlife. A mystical experience during prayer feels like direct communication with God. These emotions are real and meaningful, but they're not logical arguments. The most passionate believer and the most passionate atheist can both feel absolutely certain they're right. Feelings illuminate what matters to us. Facts illuminate what's actually happening. When was the last time you heard a religious argument that genuinely surprised you? Most of us curate our information diet so carefully that we rarely encounter challenging perspectives. We follow like-minded people on social media, attend services with believers who share our views, and read books that confirm what we already think. This creates echo chambers where our ideas bounce back to us unchanged and amplified. The result is intellectual stagnation disguised as spiritual growth. Deliberately seek out thoughtful people who disagree with you. Their questions will strengthen your real convictions and expose your weak ones. Every major religion has thousands of verses, teachings, and traditions, yet debaters typically quote the same handful that support their position while ignoring contradictory passages. Christians quote, "Love your neighbor," but skip verses about slavery. Muslims emphasize peace while downplaying conquest narratives. Atheists highlight religious violence while ignoring charitable works. This selective reading turns holy books into weapons rather than wisdom literature. The most honest approach. Acknowledge the full complexity of your sources. Cherry-picking weakens your position more than it strengthens it. Religious debates often sound like this. Either God exists or life is meaningless. Either you accept Jesus or you're going to hell. Either you follow Islamic law perfectly or you're not a real Muslim. These false dichotomies force complex spiritual questions into simplistic either-or choices. Reality is messier than that. Many Christians question certain doctrines while maintaining faith. Some atheists find profound meaning in secular humanism. Religious people can accept scientific evolution. The middle ground isn't compromise, it's nuance. Embrace the complexity instead of demanding simple answers to profound questions. I grew up in a town where everyone shared the same religious beliefs. Questioning felt impossible because dissent seemed non-existent. Social proof, our tendency to follow what others are doing, is strongest in religious communities where belonging and believing intertwine. When everyone around you nods in agreement, your convictions feel validated even if they're wrong. This is why religious minorities often hold their beliefs more thoughtfully than majorities. They've had to defend their positions. Don't let crowd size determine truth value. Sometimes the minority is right. If you're finding these psychological insights as fascinating as I am, hit that subscribe button. We explore the hidden forces behind human behavior every week, and trust me, the remaining patterns will blow your mind. Why do people with the least knowledge often argue most confidently in religious debates? The Dunning-Kruger effect explains this perfectly. Incompetence masks incompetence. Someone who's read one apologetics book feels qualified to debate theology professors. A person who's watched YouTube videos about biblical archaeology thinks they can challenge actual archaeologists. Real expertise brings humility because experts know how much they don't know. The more you study any religious tradition deeply, the more questions emerge. Confidence should decrease as complexity increases, not the opposite. Watch any religious debate about historical events, and you'll see the past being rewritten in real time. Christians claim science emerged because of Christian values while ignoring religious persecution of scientists. Muslims emphasize Islamic Golden Age achievements while downplaying conquest and forced conversion. Atheists highlight religious wars while minimizing secular violence. Everyone reshapes history to support their current beliefs. The Crusades become defensive actions or unprovoked aggression, depending on who's telling the story. History is complicated. Let it be complicated instead of forcing it into your narrative. How much of your life have you invested in your current beliefs? Years of study, thousands of hours in worship, social connections, career choices, marriage decisions. Changing your mind feels like admitting all that investment was wasted. Economists call this the sunk cost fallacy, and it keeps people in failing businesses, bad relationships, and questionable belief systems. The investment is already gone whether you change or not. A Muslim who discovers serious doubts about Islam has already spent years praying 5 times daily. Those prayers aren't wasted if they brought meaning, community, and growth. Past investment shouldn't determine future truth. Religious debates aren't really about religion. They're about tribal loyalty. Harvard researchers found that people defend their religious group's positions even when they privately disagree with them. Catholics who personally support women priests still argue against ordination when debating Protestants. Muslims who privately question certain Quranic interpretations defend them fiercely against Christian critics. The tribal instinct overrides personal conviction. We're defending our team, not our beliefs. This is why interfaith dialogue often works better than interfaith debate. Conversation builds bridges, competition builds walls. I once heard someone explain why they left Christianity. Christians are hypocrites who don't live their values. Then they explained why they became Buddhist. I'm still working on applying Buddhist principles, but the intention is what matters. Same behavior, different explanations. We judge ourselves by our intentions, but others by their actions. When religious people fail to live up to their ideals, we call them hypocrites. When we fail, we call it growth. This double standard poisons religious discourse. Apply the same charitable interpretation to others that you give yourself. Everyone is struggling to live up to ideals they believe in. When faced with contradictory information about their faith, religious people perform impressive mental gymnastics to maintain consistency. Archaeological evidence contradicts biblical timelines, so the dating methods must be flawed. Scientific evolution challenges creation stories, so God must have guided the process. Religious violence contradicts peaceful teachings, so those weren't real believers. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance reduction, and everyone does it. The mental energy required to constantly explain away contradictions is exhausting. Sometimes the simplest explanation is that your original belief was incomplete. Allow your beliefs to evolve instead of defending them at all costs. Whatever religious story you heard most recently feels most important in debates. If you just read about Christian persecution in ancient Rome, persecution dominates your arguments. If you recently learned about Islamic scientific achievements, those become your primary talking points. Recent examples feel more significant than they actually are. That's the availability heuristic at work. This is why social media makes religious debates more volatile. Everyone's feed is filled with outrage-inducing stories about the other side. Step back from the latest controversy. What patterns emerge when you look at centuries of religious history instead of this week's headlines? Why do most people end up following the same religion they were raised with, despite being exposed to hundreds of other belief systems? Status quo bias makes change feel dangerous and staying the same feel safe, even when change might be beneficial. Switching religions means losing community, disappointing family, and rebuilding your entire worldview from scratch. The effort required feels overwhelming, so we rationalize staying put. This isn't necessarily wrong. Tradition provides stability and wisdom. But recognize when you're choosing comfort over truth. Some religious changes are worth the disruption they cause. Here's the question that transforms religious debates from combat to conversation. What evidence would convince you that you're wrong? Most people have never seriously considered this. They've built fortress-like belief systems designed to repel any attack rather than discover truth. But when someone can articulate what would change their mind, something magical happens. The conversation shifts from defending positions to exploring possibilities. A Christian might say, if archaeologists found Jesus' body with DNA evidence, I'd have to reconsider. An atheist might say, reproducible miraculous healings verified by multiple independent medical teams would make me reconsider. The question reveals whether someone is seeking truth or just seeking to win. Religious debates end predictably because we're not actually debating religion. We're defending our identity, our tribe, and our invested time against perceived threats. The confirmation bias, backfire effect, and 18 other psychological patterns turn every conversation into a battle nobody can win. But there's hope. When we recognize these patterns in ourselves, religious discussion can become exploration instead of war. Next week, we're diving into the specific techniques that actually work for productive disagreement across belief systems. The results will surprise you. This content is for educational purposes and represents psychological research, not professional advice. For matters of faith, theology, or personal beliefs, consult qualified religious leaders, counselors, or spiritual advisors as needed.